looking like this? Tell me, am I looking like this? No, not at all.
Hey, what's going on, you beautiful people? My name's Ty-Dye. I hope you guys are having a pretty awesome day today. My day's been pretty awesome so far. So looking at the comments, one thing that I noticed a lot of you guys want me to do more of is tutorials. And a lot of people have specifically been asking for Maya tutorials. So today what I thought I could do is do a tutorial on how to make your very first game-ready object. This is going to be a very simple object, but I'm going to be going through the entire pipeline from Maya all the way to Unreal Engine 4. So I can show you guys exactly how you can model this, UV it, texture it, and put it into the engine with all the appropriate textures. Now this is going to be kind of cool because we're going to go through a lot of different programs, but if you guys don't have these programs, I'm going to let you know there are ways around it. All the programs that we're going to be using are Maya, which is free. You can get a 3-year license for this program for free. We're going to be using the Unreal Engine to plug it all in, which is also free. The only thing is if you're texturing, we're going to be either using Photoshop or Substance Painter. Now I'm assuming a lot of you guys out there already have Photoshop. You can texture with that. I'll get a little bit more in depth on that once I get to the texturing part of the tutorial, but for me personally, I'm using Substance Painter. A lot of you guys can find a way to get your hands on this out there online, but it is an amazing program for texturing. If you are looking into the game field or the animated film field, I would highly recommend looking into Substance Painter. So that's what I'm going to be using. But like I said, if you just have Photoshop, you can still use that to follow along with this tutorial. So we're going to be making a very simple object because, like I said, this is going to be assuming a lot of you guys out there haven't made a game-ready object yet. So we're going to be making a coffee mug, which sounds super easy, but I don't want this tutorial to drag on forever. So I'm going to start off by clicking Create, going down to the Polygon Primitives option and clicking Cylinder. Now, when making a game-ready object, one of the things you want to keep in mind is it needs to be running at real time. So you can't have, super high-quality objects, but you can use a lot of tricks to get around that. In this case, we're using a coffee mug. So it really doesn't have to be too complex. As you can see, our subdivisions is set to 16, and this is just under the attribute editor under polycylinder 1. This is where our object is located in Maya. So obviously, if you want it to look super high quality, you can bring this all the way up to, say, 50, and it's like perfectly rounded, but that wouldn't run nearly as smooth in a game as something that was near, maybe around 10. 10 is a little bit jaggedy. You can clearly see the different subdivisions around there, which isn't too good. So I think for this specific example, I think 13 is a good number. I mean, you could probably afford to make it a bit lower or a bit higher depending on what you're doing, but I think 13, it keeps a nice roundness and it's not too much. So we're gonna keep it like that. Next up, I wanna resize this by hitting R on the keyboard. And we get these little pulley tabs here. So for me personally, I'm just gonna go, you can, change these on the X, Y, and Z axis. I'm sure a lot of you guys are familiar with these if you've ever used a 3D software. But these squares here, they sort of let you use just 2 axes at a time. So I'm gonna be using this green one here to sort of shrink and grow it in these 2 axes, just sort of to get a coffee shape, or coffee mug shape. Roughly about this. I actually have a mug right in front of me right now that I'm going off of. I would highly recommend, of course, whenever you're doing something like this, to have reference images. But as far as the cylinder goes for the mug, that's about as accurate as I think I'm going to get it right there. So we're going to get to something a little bit more technical, I guess you could say, when it comes to making this. So obviously the mug has to dip down and be extruded in. So the way I'm going to do that is with this selected, I'm going to hold right click and go to face, and just sort of click on each face and hold shift on the top here, all the way around, and then we're going to hit Control E. Now this is going to let us do an extrusion. So once we hit Control E, I'm going to hit R once again to resize this, and we can resize the extrusion to be perfectly parallel with our other polygons. So as you can see, we're making more polygons through this extrusion, and I'm just going to try and make a lip for the cup. So I think right about here is an appropriate size, I'd like to say. And then if we want to bring it down, we can just hit Control E once again to do another extrusion, this time pressing W to bring it up or down. And I'm just going to bring this way down. It might even help to go into your side viewer and maybe hit on wireframe mode and just bring it down to, roughly near the bottom of the mug where it would normally be. In wireframe mode is just this little skeleton of a cube right there that you can toggle on and off. And as you can see, our edge is brought all the way down to a comfortable level at the bottom there. So once again, we can go back to my normal view. And if for those of you who have never done this before, to get between your views, you press spacebar and then spacebar on whatever view you'd like. And there you go. So now we have the base shape of this mug. But as you can see, we sort of have these sharp edges, and we don't want that. On the outside, it looks kind of smooth, but on the inside, it's pretty, it's just not looking too right. So what I want to do here is I'm going to click on this and hold right click and go to face. And I'm going to select all these faces, and I can do this pretty quickly by clicking on one, holding shift and double clicking on the one beside it so it selects the entire ring. Then under mesh display, I can go to soften edge, And now you can see it's soft inside, but it's also made it look sort of, you know, a little bit odd as well. So we're gonna have to harden some edges to sort of counteract that. So to harden some edges, I'm gonna do the same thing, but I'm gonna go to my edge mode by once again holding right click and going to edge and double clicking on this edge so it selects the entire ring. And then holding shift, I'm gonna double click on this edge so it selects this entire ring as well. So we just have these two edges here, none of the ones on the inside. And I'm gonna go to mesh display and harden edge. Now this way we get that soft inside and that soft outside, but we also have a hard top and bottom. So it looks a little bit more like a real mug would be, soft on the outside and hard on the top. So the next thing I want to do is make the handle, and then from there we can go to UVs. So the handle is going to be relatively simple as well. We're going to be using another cylinder, so I'm just going to go to create, polygon primitives, and once again add in a cylinder. W, once again on the keyboard to move it. And this one I'm going to press R to scale it. And I'm just going to scale it so it's very skinny using once again the green square. Actually, before I do that, I want to change the subdivisions to a more reasonable level. This one can be a lot lower because it's just the handle. Maybe even something like 10. I'm feeling 10 would be okay. So I'm going to bring this down so it's very skinny, roughly the size of what a mug handle would be like. And then also, I don't want it to be a perfect cylinder, so I want to shrink it in the one axis here, I believe that is the Z-axis, so that it's a little bit more, you know, flattened out. It's still rounded, but it's a bit more flattened out. Now from here, I'm going to just move the object by pressing W to get to my move tool. And this is where you could have done this earlier. I'm going to add more subdivisions to this so I can sort of bend it into the side. And to do that, I'm going to go up here to this little icon. It shows a cube with a hammer. This is our modeling toolkit, it says here. And I'm going to go to the multi-cut tool, which is just hidden there. Here we go, under tools, the multi-cut tool. Now I'm going to add more subdivisions. Now you can do this in a bunch of different ways. This is just how I'm most comfortable doing it. And once you're in edge mode, if you hold control, as you can see, it starts making a ring of edges here. So if I click that, there's a whole new edge loop right there. You can also just do insert edge loop, but this is just sort of a quick sort of cheat, in my opinion, to do it. So I'm just going to go into the side view here. It doesn't need to be perfect by any means, but I'm just going to add, let's start with 3, and I'm just going to edit this by moving this edge loop a little bit so it's in the middle, and moving this one down a little bit as well. And then we're going to bend it and make it look exactly how we want it to. Another thing I want to do though is, since we don't want to use faces that we don't need, and these are going to be inside the mug, I'm just going to delete these faces by selecting them and pressing the delete key. And same with the bottom, because they're going to be sticking inside the mug, and if they're unneeded polygons, we might as well save the geometry for something else in our scene, just because we don't exactly need them, right? So now what I'm going to do is press spacebar, go into my side view. I'm going to hold the right click button and go to vertex, and now I'm just going to sort of edit where these points are. So I'm going to make them a little bit more rounded, and I can already tell I'm probably going to need a bit more geometry here. Unless we're going for like a super low poly. And I'm also going to do something, I'm going to rotate these points by, the button I pressed to rotate was E. So I press E and I can rotate this. I'm going to rotate it so it's level with the mug. And I'm just going to stick it inside. Same with the top here, by pressing E and then rotating this. And then W to move it, and move it inside. And then I'm just going to rotate this so it's a little bit more flexible. I'm just selecting all these vertices here and all the vertices here, and just sort of rotating them so they match along. Now I've noticed that this isn't looking the absolute greatest, so what I'm going to do is first of all select this and go to Mesh Display and Soften Edges, just like we did with the main part of the mug, just to make it a bit softer. And I also want to make it a bit bigger. It's obviously not looking perfect here. So Object Mode, R for resizing. I'm going to make it a bit wider, but then I also kind of want to make it a bit thicker as well. And you can see when I make it thicker, it changes a bunch of things here. So I'm going to have to go in and adjust a few things here. Maybe bring this a bit closer as well. And this is where you can feel free to add more points. So I might just go in here and use my subdivision tool and create a few more points. So I want you to hold in control and just going over that just to sort of smoothen out this geometry here. And just sort of get it to a position where you like it. And I could probably afford to just grab all these points and move them a bit closer in. These are also sticking in into the mug, which we don't want. We want them to be hidden, right? So we're gonna move those in there. And all in all, as far as a coffee mug goes, that handle isn't too bad. Obviously, you can afford to, or if you can afford to, you know, add in a few more polygons here to round it out a little bit. I might just go ahead and do so, just because it is a little, it's really not that rounded, right? So we're trying to get it to be nice, but obviously, if you do have a restraint or you can't use too many polygons, just do what you're able to do, right? So I think for now, that's a pretty reasonable amount of polygons, especially if it's a mug and you're looking at it from, like, say, this far away. That's looking perfectly fine. Obviously, I could go around and mess with this and make it look picture perfect and sort of, you know, adjust some of the scaling here like that. Those vertices seem to be a little bit pinched, same with down here. But for the sake of this tutorial, I'm not going to make it as perfect as I probably would like to. I think for right now, that's perfectly fine for a coffee mug. So that's essentially our mug right there. It's not bad. We have 264 tries, 145 faces, and it's just a simple mug. So now the next thing that we're gonna have to do is we are going to have to UV this. Now UVing is something that's kind of hard to wrap your head around at first. It was something that I definitely was not used to for the longest time, but it's not that bad. So what we're gonna be doing here is I'm gonna split apart this into a bunch of different objects. For example, the bottom, the main cylinder part, the top, and the inside, I'm gonna split up. But first, it's always nice to try this. I'm gonna go to UV, my UV editor, so I can see my UVs here. I'm going to turn off the texture by pressing this little icon up here with the, kind of looks like some mountains in the sun. And one thing I like to do when I'm working with smaller objects like this, before I do a manual UV, I like to just go to UV and then go to automatic. I'm going to press the square here. Plane 6 and fewest pieces is obviously the best idea here. I'm going to press apply and see what it gives me. So automatically, what happened is it broke it up into, like I said, the ring at the top, the ring at the bottom here, the other ring at the bottom there, and these side pieces. But you can see these side pieces, if I go to my shell selection, are all split up, which is weird. I obviously don't want this split up, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to select this face, and I want this face to sort of be the seam, right? Like I don't want it to be like this. So what I'm personally going to do is I'm going to select face and select all these faces by clicking one, holding shift and double clicking the one beside it. So I select all the faces around the cup. And for this, I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to go to edit mesh, edit mesh, and extract. Now what that's going to do is just going to make this a completely different object than the rest of the mug. Now the reason I want to do this is because I want to UV this one separately. Everything else turned out perfectly fine, except for the inside, but we'll get to that in a second. So this part is a little bit weird because, as you can see, it split up all the faces into these weird sections. There's an easy way to do this. I can go to UV, planar, and click on this little square here. And let's try a projection from the x-axis. So this can project it from the front. And as you can see, we can see our mug in the front axis, but obviously the ones in the back are cut off. So we're going to have to do a little bit of extra work. So I want to have the seam for this on the back. And the reason I want the seam on the back is because if I have a logo or some text or something on the front of the mug, I don't want it to be all cut up. So what I'm going to do here is, since it's just this outside ring, I'm going to hold right click, go to my edge tool, select this edge, and then in the UV editor, go to polygons, cut UV edge. Now holding right click, I can select my UV option, highlight everything here, and this icon here that says unfold selected UVs, I can right click that, put it on none, and press apply. And from there, as you can see, it's all perfectly folded out. I can test this by adding a texture. I'm just going to minimize this for a second. I can test this by adding a texture. So if I hold right click, assign favorite materials and Lambert, and then let's say if I go to my Lambert options and go to color, I'm just going to add a checker texture to it. And I'm going to turn on my texture with this little icon here of the ball with the checker on it. You can see that the checker goes around perfectly fine, and the seam is actually on the back there, which is exactly what we want. So we UV'd this properly. If I select that, you can see we UV'd that properly. Now if we select the rest of the mug, I'm also going to assign that Lambert so we can see the checkers. It's also done properly. It's perfectly projected as well. The seam is also in the correct spot for the, well actually not really. The inside is also a bit of a mess. So I think for the most part, it's okay, but I'm gonna do the same thing we did there just in case I got you guys confused. So once again, I'm gonna select the inside, go to Edit Mesh, Extract. I'm gonna select this object, go to UV and planar, and then the x-axis, I'm gonna apply it. And then we're going to have to cut it once again. So I'm going to cut it along this line here. So I'm going to select edge, click that edge, and we're doing that because it's the same one we did before. It's near the handle. We don't see too much back there. Go to polygons, cut UV edge. So now that is the slice version. I'm going to select all these, right click on the unfold settings and press apply because it's the same as before. And now we have a beautiful checker pattern on the outside as well as the inside. And the reason you want a checker pattern is because that way, it means that there's no distortion among the UVs. So we can paint exactly what we want directly onto here and it's not going to be distorted at all. It's essentially saving the texture data into a 2D image for a 3D object. And that's why we have to do this. So now if I select all of this by just going to object mode, select it all, I'm going to deselect the handle though. We haven't done that yet. You can see that we have everything we need essentially, but they're all different sizes. So what we want to do is get all the checkers to be roughly the same size. So I'm going to select this one, which is the bottom of the cup. And I'm just using shell mode by holding right click and going to shell. And I'm going to resize this one by pressing R and sort of bring it up to the same size until the checkers are roughly the same size as the things on the outside, because that way they're sharing the same amount of, texture space. Just do that for everything there, just to make sure all the checkers are roughly the same size. And same with this top part. Some parts are going to be a little bit harder to see than others, but that seems roughly right there. So I'm going to leave that for now, and then we're going to jump onto the handle. So the handle is going to be almost the exact same to do, considering it's also technically a cylinder. I'm actually going to isolate it for now. To do that, I'm going to select this little isolate select icon here of a square and a mouse clicking on it. So what we're going to do here is, once again, I'm going to open up my UV editor. And this is what it has by default. I'm going to actually assign that checker texture to see what it looks like on its own. So assign existing material and the one that we had there. And it's not horrible, but I'd still like to fix it a little bit. So I'm going to do a UV planar, and we can't do the x-axis. So I'm going to try the y-axis. No, sorry, the z-axis, because I'm going to be splitting it down the middle here. And we are going to select all the faces down the inside. So there's not an exact line through the middle, so we're just going to have to go one to the side. So I'm just going to click one and then hold shift and double click the edge underneath of it. And now we have selected, actually I'm going to do it manually. So I'm going to just hold shift and select an entire line of edges all the way up. Go to polygons, cut UV edge, go to our UV option. Right click the unfold and apply. And as you can see, it's a little bit weird. That's not exactly what we want. So I'm going to press Ctrl Z on that. It's still cut though. So I'm going to try just horizontal. And it unfolds it in a way where it's a little bit weird there. Sometimes you might have to experiment with it. Maybe click vertical now and apply and see what happens, and then none and apply and see what happens. And it's just getting kind of weird. So we're obviously not very happy with that. I'm going to try and do, from the start, just vertical. And that's obviously not right. So a lot of this you might just have to mess around with, or maybe try cutting it somewhere else. The reason I'm cutting it down the middle is simply because the midpoint is where we're not going to see it. It's where the bottom of the handle is, right? So you're not going to be able to see underneath of there. So that's why I'm choosing to do that. And even though this looks a little bit odd, and it's clearly not right, the handle is going to be all one color. So I'm just going to try and mess around with this a little bit more. And if we can't get it to work properly, I might just leave it the way it is. So I'm just going to maybe try and do this a few more times. Try a none. Yeah, it doesn't seem to be working out too well. Maybe if I move these UVs to the top, move these to the bottom, and just try and straighten these out a little bit, right? So I'm going to try and get these all straight by pressing these little arrow keys, by selecting all of the points in a line, and then moving them up or down, just so that way they're all straightened out, because they're theoretically supposed to be straight. And maybe just move those up a little bit. So it really looks nice on the back, which is all we really want, to be honest, but let's just try it one last time and see if it works out. All right, we're getting it to be a little bit better. So it's a lot of tinkering when it comes to UVs. Okay, we didn't want that. And let's just try one last, none. And that's weird. So I think this is good for now because we're only going to be seeing the outside, and that's exactly how we want it on the outside. So now I want to go back by pressing isolate selected, and I'm going to combine this whole thing. So first of all, I'm going to select all the objects, and as you can see, they're all over the place here. We'll get to that in a second. And with everything selected, I'm going to go to Mesh, Combine, and then one last thing, I want to go to Vertices, select all these vertices, go to Mesh Tools, or sorry, Edit Mesh, and then Merge, and click on this little square. And I want to make this number really small. So in this case, 0.0034. And what that's going to do is all the vertices that are on top of each other are going to merge together. And as you remember, I sort of separated some of these parts. So they're going to have same vertices, but they're going to be, duplicates because they're different objects. This is just going to shrink the number of vertices we have and make it a lot easier to work with. So I'm going to merge these, and you can even see here where it says vert, it's going to go down. Yep, it went down a significant amount. So now everything is roughly the same size. Even the handle has the same size of checkers. We have to go into our UV editor and essentially organize this. So everything's the same size. And yeah, so what I'm going to do is, since everything's already set up in a way where we want it to be this size, I'm going to try and line it up to be somewhat of a square shape, because we're going to have to fit everything into one of these squares behind us. And maybe even I can fit that in there. I might even just shrink it a little bit because it's the bottom of the mug and it doesn't necessarily matter too much. And maybe fit that there and that there. There's probably, this is something that a lot of people don't enjoy doing too much. I kind of like it. It's kind of like doing a puzzle, but you kind of need to fit this in here as efficiently as possible by resizing it and getting everything to fit in one way or another. So I think, to be honest, this might just be the best that we can get it for now. I might just have to resize that down a teensy bit, rotate it so the flat end is on the bottom. And I guess I could afford to technically make this handle a bit bigger just because we have room to do so. So that's our UVs. We have now done our UVs for this object. And I want to show you how to do this if you're going to be using Photoshop. So if you're using Photoshop, I actually did another tutorial on character modeling that goes a little bit more in depth. So if you are going to be doing this in Photoshop, I highly recommend checking that out. I will have a link in the description and on screen for sure. So if you're doing this in Photoshop, you would go to Polygons, UV Snapshot, and then you choose the dimensions that you'd want your grid to be in, because you're going to be exporting this image here necessarily. So I'm going to do mine maybe at a 2K resolution of, let's see, 2048 by 2048. And then I'm going to choose a location for it, for example, the desktop. I'm going to call this UV. So if you're doing this in Photoshop, you're going to want to do this, press OK. Oh, sorry, you have to obviously select it first and then press OK. And then, so on our desktop now, we have this sheet of UVs, which you can go into Photoshop, and whatever you color on each polygon is going to pop up in the Maya screen when you load in the texture on top of that. So essentially, you're going to be painting onto this, and it's going to pop up in there. Like I said, I have another tutorial on this if you are a little bit more curious, but whatever you draw into here, it's going to pop up on there. So that's how you can do it hand-paintedly. I don't know if that's a word, but we're gonna go with it. So that's how you can do it if you're doing a hand-painted texture style. And just make sure that you turn off this grid when you're done. This is sort of like a template guideline. But for those of you who are going to be doing it on the Substance Painter version, which is what I'm going to be doing right now, I'll jump over to that right now. So one thing to keep in mind, though, if you are doing this in Photoshop, you can still do this and put it into the Unreal Engine. It's just going to be a little bit different, but I'll get to that. So I'm going to export this object now so we can put it into Substance Painter. By doing that, I'm going to go and click on our object, go to File, Export Selection, and there's a bunch of different options. OBJ sometimes isn't there, but essentially use OBJ or FBX. I'll just use FBX because I know that one is already preloaded for a lot of these newer Maya programs. They don't have OBJ there for some reason, so I'm going to go to FBX because I know that one works. And export selected. I'm going to just export it to the desktop and title it Mug. Microphone's in the way, so a little bit hard to type. So I'm just going to export that. Warning, unsupported maps. Any warnings? Okay. I don't really know what that is. Maybe it'll be an issue. Maybe it won't be. And now I'm going to just bring over Substance Painter. And I'm going to go to File, New. We're going to select our mesh, which is on the desktop. And we're going to make sure, this is important, that our template is going to be PBR Metal Rough Shelf. Now there's a bunch of options. When I first started, I did Dota 2. For some reason, you can't use reflective materials, so just keep in mind that you're using the PBR Metal Rough. Other ones I haven't experimented with too much, but I'm going to go with that. We actually don't have any maps, so if we had an ambient occlusion map or a normal map or something, we'd add them in here, but we don't have any of those. We just have the object itself. So as you can see, this is our screen. We have the mug here, and we have our UVs here. Now we can cycle through the viewport. So if we press F1, it's going to give us this view here of both. F2 is just 3D, and F1 is this, F2 is 3D view, and F3 is just the 2D version. So I like to work in F1, where it gives us both. And we're just going to sort of view around this mug. We're going to do a few things. We're not going to texture a whole lot, obviously, because we really don't need to. It's a coffee mug, right? So, for this one, I'm just going to use these basic materials that come with the program. For example, I'm going to add this plastic material, which is essentially just going to be the base of the mug. Obviously, I don't really want it blue. I kind of want it to be a little bit more of a mug-ish color. I want to make it white, maybe even like a bit of a tint. I don't know, maybe add like a warmer tint to it, like an orange mug or something, right? Let's see, whatever looks good. I don't want it to be like too crazy, right? I just want to make a mug. I feel like a nice peach color mug is not too shabby. And one thing I do want to do though is, let's say we wanted to make the rim on the top a different color, because I know sometimes it's like that. I have a mug where the top of it is like a gold rim. One of my favorite mugs, actually. It's pretty cool. So I'm going to show you, say you wanted to color in specific polygons, how you would go about doing so. So I'm going to just see if there's a gold material. Yep, pure gold. And I'm going to put that on top. And as you can see, it changes everything to be gold. We don't really want that. So I'm going to right click on the pure gold layer and go to add black mask. So now we have this black mask. And whenever we paint on it with, say, if we paint on it with white or whatever, it's going to reveal the gold, which is kind of cool. And we can use a cool trick here. If we go to this tool up here, which is titled Polygon Fill, and we have it set to white, and we're in our black mask, we can go around and click on this ring, and it's going to just go by polygon and go all the way around. You can even see it up here in our 2D UV option, and you can just select them if you want. And now we have a gold ring at the top. Say you even want to make the handle gold, you can just select it all here, and now I have a gold handle. So now I have a gold rim and a gold handle. You know what, if we're gonna make it gold, I might as well make this a different color itself, maybe like a gray or something. And one last thing I want to show you is how to paint with normal maps, or maybe put a logo on here or something. So to do that, we're gonna be using something called I believe it's called, where is it? Stencil. So stencils are essentially these little logos here at the bottom. I'm actually going to open up Photoshop to give you guys a better idea how to properly use these things. And we're going to make our own stencil just so I can show you guys. I'm just going to probably write my name on it or something like that, just to make it very simple to do. So I'm going to go File. It's just loading up, I guess. I have too many programs running. File New, and I'm just going to make this like a 1K resolution. So 1024 by 1024. And let's see. So if you noticed here in Substance Painter, these are all a black background with a white color. And we can use these as stencils, but we need to follow that same idea and guideline when we're making our own. So I'm going to make the entire background black. And then I'm just going to write with some text, maybe just, my YouTube channel name. We're going to make it white. So let's go for it. There we go. And obviously this isn't going to be the coolest looking mug in the world, but it's going to be my mug. So there we go. So now that we have our stencil, whatever we color in the white is going to pop up on our object, and everything black is just not going to be, registered. So I'm just going to export this, or save for web, sorry. Save, and just the desktop, I'm going to name it Stents, because I'm too cool to write stencil. And so now what we can do is with our alphas there, I'm just going to make this a bit smaller. I'm going to drag this into our alphas, and it's going to give us these options here as in import for current session only, import for when we're using this file, or import to shelf forever. I'm going to just do current session. So now that we have that there, as you can see, it's in our alphas. I'm going to make a new layer. Actually, there's already a new layer here. And if I want to, I can go to, first of all, I'm going to change the color of my brush. I'm going to make it, say, black, but I'm also going to do something else. I'm going to add some height to it. So this is our height bar here. If you don't see it there, just click height. And what it's going to do is it's going to physically paint height on as well, and it's going to export a normal map when we're done. So I'm going to bring the height up a little bit because I want this text to extrude a bit, like a really cool mug. Like we're making that really cool mug here. So now I'll just do an example. If I paint onto here, it kind of sticks out a bit. It looks like it sticks out a bit. That's the power of normal maps, but it actually isn't affecting the geometry at all. That's just because we have a black brush and we put the height up a little bit. Now, if we want to add our name and have it look like that, we're going to scroll and find stencils, click on stencils, and try and find what we just made. Let's see. There it is, stents. And as you can see, it's over top of everything. So I'm going to want to zoom in and get it right here, because I know this part is actually the outside of my mug. So I'm just going to raise this up a little bit, my brush size, and I'm just going to draw onto here. And we're going to get a really cool effect. To be honest, this is probably going to be like way too big, like 80 times bigger than it needs to be. Also, I should probably dropped the softness of my brush a little bit down. It is taking quite some time to color this in. But as you can see, you get the idea pretty much. That now if I turn off this stencil, just press X on it, we sort of have my name wrapped around the side here. We have a little bit of debris on the side that I'm just going to erase using the eraser tool. It works just like any other eraser tool that you'd use in any program. And now we sort of have this mug where we've used different textures, and we sort of have it popping out a little bit, which looks kind of cool. You know, this is just sort of like a basic game asset. So now that we're done with that, we're going to put it into the Unreal Engine. Before we do that, we have to export these textures. So I'm just going to switch my views to this view here, which isn't really that important, but I'm going to right click, go to Export Textures, and pick a location for it. So I'm just going to do it to the desktop. Choose our size. I'm just going to do 1024 by 1024 because we're going to make this pretty low resolution, and hit export. Export successful. That's always good to hear. And now we have all these different maps, essentially. We have a bunch of different maps here. So we have our stencil. We have our normal map. We have our... that's another version of the normal map. We're going to be using this one, though. Don't use the other one. You can probably just delete that one, actually. Roughness map. This is going to be our metallic. So anything shiny, whatever is white is going to shine. Base color. And height, etc. So these are all our different maps, right? So now I'm going to bring this over to the Unreal Engine. We're just going to start a new project. It really doesn't matter in this example. I'm just going to go with a third person and just create project. Just to give you a rough example as to what we're doing here. And let's see, it's going to start this up. I probably should have just done this before, but it really shouldn't take too long to open up here. If you are doing this in Photoshop, though, I would recommend exporting your texture out now, and you're probably just going to be having a basic color map. You're not going to have any reflectivity. You can still do that because, as you saw with those maps I just shown, whatever is white is going to be reflective, and whatever's black isn't going to be reflective. You can sort of mimic that in Photoshop, do it manually, and then import it to the textures that we're going to be making right now. So I'm going to show you how to do that. But essentially, it's a lot easier if you are using Substance Painter or even 3D Coat or anything like that. It's going to be a lot easier to have those maps made for you so you don't have to manually do it. But it is definitely an option. It is something that you can do. So Unreal is opening up now. It's taken its sweet time, but here we are in the Unreal Engine. So let's see. We're going to import a lot of things here. So I press import. I'm going to be importing, let's see, the mug, and then all of these maps that were just exported from Substance Painter. So we have our mug and the other thing. So I'm not going to be importing my stencil or the UV sheet or anything like that, because that is not something that we need. Just press import anyways. Warnings, that's always cool. So let's try and find our mug. I'm just going to click this and drop it in. It is very small, so I'm going to press R to resize it and just scale it up. We're going to make it relatively big just so it's easier to work with. It's also upside down, I believe. So I'm just going to rotate that. Yep. All right, and rotate it a little bit more. So now we're going to create a texture. And to do that, I'm just going to right click in here, go to material, and I'm going to name this mug. Mug underscore texture. You have to use underscores when naming these, by the way. And I'm going to double click on that. We're going to get into a pretty intimidating looking, lovely texture editor. So I'm just going to essentially import all of these textures that just came out of Substance Painter, and I'm just going to drag them in. And so now we essentially now just have to match these up. So if we look here, this one over here says base color. So I'm going to select this little arrow doohickey thing, move that to base color. It's going to show you in real time what it's doing. The next one is this grayed out one, which is height. So I don't know. We're going to get back to that in a second. This one that says metallic. I'm going to grab this and move it over to metallic. This one's obviously our normal map, but we're not going to use this one. We're going to be using this one here. So I'm actually going to delete this one. For some reason, Substance Painter exports 2 normal maps. I don't know why that is, but I'm going to move this one over because I can tell by the way that the letters are sticking out that is the one that we want. Roughness map, I'm going to plug this one in as well. And all we're left with is this map, which is our height map. And to be honest, I don't think we have a height map option here, so I'm just going to delete it for now. Maybe some of you guys know how to, work with that. But anyways, I'm going to press save. So it saves our hard work here. And now if I put the mug texture onto the mug, you can see, let's see, it seems to be like upside down or something. Yep, everything is backwards. Everything, oh wait, no, wow. No, it was the right way. It just appears to be backwards for some reason. So let me try something here. All right, I'm back. So I did have to go out and do something off screen here. So I couldn't actually find a correct way to flip over the texture. I was watching some tutorials online myself, and they seem to be using a lot of weird options here on the side that I've never seen before, and I wasn't comfortable sort of explaining it to you. So what I actually did was I opened up these 4 files into Photoshop and just flip them horizontally by, just going in here, pressing Control T, right click, flip horizontal, etc. And then re-importing them. And when I did that, it actually worked out perfectly fine. So now if I go into this play option here, you can see our mug. And it is actually like a real game asset, like I'm bumping into it. I can jump on top of it. That is kind of weird though, how it wasn't working as far as the texture being flipped over. But essentially that's the entire process of making a game ready object. So as you can see, it's in the game, it's working. And that is my tutorial for a game ready object. Hopefully you guys learned something cool. Hopefully I exposed you to something that you haven't seen before, for those of you, and there is a few of you guys who have been commenting asking for this. Hopefully you guys did learn something, did enjoy it, and hopefully you guys make something awesome. I would love to see some of the game assets you make. So like I said, guys, this is the Unreal Engine, and it is completely free. Same with Maya, and I know most of you guys have Photoshop, but if you can get your hands on Substance Painter, I highly recommend doing so. But once again, guys, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed, make sure to drop a like on this video. More tutorials are coming soon. But once again, my name's been Tie-Dye. Hopefully you enjoyed the video, and I will catch you in the next one. See ya.